Welcome to the FEI Podcast, where financial leaders come to think forward, lead with confidence, and navigate what's next. For more than 95 years, Financial Executives International has brought together financial leaders to share insight, shape strategy, and elevate the profession. This is where those conversations continue. Real perspectives from the people making the decisions. Real strategies from inside the moments that matter most. What you see is the outcome. What shaped it is what we explore.
I'm Heather Cole, your host. As a finance leader, executive coach, and proud member of FEI, I'm here to bring you conversations that go deeper, from leadership and strategy to innovation and the future of finance. Because what shaped the outcome is often where the real lesson lives. If you've ever found yourself wondering, am I doing this right? You're in the right place. Let's get into it. We're recording live from the FEI Leaders Forum today in San Antonio. I'm joined by Chrissy O'Hara, CFO of SoftLedger, a finance leader who has taken the leap from traditional accounting and corporate finance into the unpredictable, highly pressured, and deeply rewarding world of entrepreneurship. Chrissy's story is one that many financial executives can relate to. She started out with the classic CPA path, built her experience around audit, financial reporting, hedge funds, startups, acquisitions, and FP&A. But then she stepped into the world of entrepreneurship and the seat as a CFO in a growing software company built to solve the problems that many accountants know all too well. That problem: why does accounting software feel so rigid, clunky, and disconnected from how the business actually operates? In this episode, Chrissy gets real about what freedom actually looks like when you start a company. Spoiler alert, it is not less work. It's more flexibility, more pressure, more pivots, more decisions that test your resiliency. We talk about cash flow stress, startup survival, letting go of perfectionism, and why finance leaders have to stop waiting for permission to step into bigger, riskier, and more strategic roles. As we explore AI, the future of accounting technology, and Chrissy's bold belief that finance and accounting professionals need to be in the room where the next generation of tools is being built, because if we're not, other people will make those decisions for us. This conversation is honest, practical, and energizing. Whether you're a CFO, controller, accounting leader, entrepreneur, or someone wondering if it's time to take a bigger bet on yourself, Chrissy's message is clear. Finance leaders are not just the adults in the room. They can be the innovators, the builders, and the ones that are changing the conversations. Chrissy, thanks for joining us. Chrissy, welcome. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. So, as Heather said, I'm Chrissy O'Hara. So I'm originally from Pittsburgh. I don't know if we should do the whole resume thing, but I'll just give you the brief one. So originally from Pittsburgh. I went to college at George Washington in DC, and then also got my master's in accounting there. Kind of did the typical accounting route, right? I started at Ernst & Young in audit, got my CPA, et cetera, in DC. Then I took a financial reporting role at Fannie Mae before then moving to Chicago, where I worked at a hedge fund called Citadel. Did some finance and accounting there. And then while there, I got my MBA at Northwestern, went to school at night. Because I knew I wanted to be a CFO, so I was kind of trying to, very accounting background, was kind of trying to pivot and do a little finance too. And then while we were in Chicago, my husband actually was working at a company, similar background to mine. We met at EY. And he was in charge of finding new accounting software. So he was looking for all the mid-market, kind of available options, not really that great. And just a lot of them are like kind of old and clunky. And, you see all these new softwares coming out. And he's kind of like, why can't we have nice things as accountants, like everyone else does? So he called up his friend from college, Jeff Ostrega, and he was a software engineer and was like, do you want to help me build this thing? So that was kind of how it started. So it was nights and weekends for a couple of years. Then they got into an accelerator in Santa Monica. And so, while I'm getting my MBA and doing all this stuff, we moved to Santa Monica. So it's a bit hectic for a second. I had to kind of fly back and forth, finish my MBA, but we made it. And so in LA, I worked at a real estate company. So I left as the VP of finance there. It was kind of like a vertically integrated real estate company. We did some hard money lending, some fix and flip, commercial real estate holdings, things like that. So that was a really great experience for my career. It also kind of taught me about like CFO-ship, if you will. And while doing that, I was moonlighting at SoftLedger at my husband's company because they needed a CFO. So I was doing that as well. So mainly just like kind of the FP&A forecasts, things like that, closing the books, doing the bookkeeping, if you will. And then kind of trying to, obviously get like funding, et cetera. That kind of, I built all the forecasts and things like that for those. Then we ended up having our first kid in Santa Monica, and then tight apartment, 1-year-old. So we were like, all right, where do we move? It was either going to be DC or Pittsburgh. And so we moved to Pittsburgh. So we've been there for now 4 years. We relocated the company there. While we were in transition, I couldn't work at the LA company anymore. So I took a role as the head of finance of a startup called Darwin Homes. And so that had been started by two ex-DoorDash guys, Silicon Valley guys, and it was headquartered in Austin. And then we got bought while I was there by a publicly traded company in New York called Pagaya Financial. And so I was kind of like part of that deal, flying to New York, helping. For a while, it was just me and the two co-founders that knew. So kind of got that taste of that startup, like acquisition.
Wear every
thing.
hat.
I mean, yeah. And no one knows what's going on. So you can't really ask anyone for help. So, but yeah, and then so given that, we then got acquired and, we were remote at Darwin, not at Pagaya. Am I going to move to New York? Probably not. All these things. I was also pregnant with my second kid, so it was a little bit hectic. But after having my second kid and kind of like reevaluating after the Pagaya thing, I took a couple kind of consulting roles, but then, it sounds weird to say this, but an opportunity opened up at my husband's company. They were looking for someone that could be more of like a COO, could be kind of like a CEO number two, given I have similar background to my husband. I've been there since the beginning. It kind of made sense. And so I moved into the full-time role of CFO. I obviously been the CFO for a while, but 2 years ago I went full-time.
That's a really big decision. And I know a lot of our audience, there's a lot of financial executives that I talk to or that I coach that are like, my bigger goal is this. It's a whole different version of life, right?
Yeah.
But you've actually started living it.
Yes.
I've done this as well. It's a little bit like a fire hose.
It is.
When you start. Like, what advice would you give to people that are thinking, someday I want to step out? I want what we call freedom. Maybe you could describe freedom to the listeners.
It takes a while. I would say, as you know, it's one day at a time. You really can't like rush these things. It feels like, when we first started, we got into the incubator. They gave almost no money, but like enough to start, full time. And then it was like a year and a half till we had a paying customer. And it was, I don't know, $300 a month. And it's nothing. And so we thought that when we first moved out to Santa Monica, we'd obviously know my husband's co-founder for years and his wife. So, we'd be like sitting on the beach and be like, yeah, in 3 years, we'll be as big as Microsoft, right? And then we'll just sell and we'll all be retired and surfing. Absolutely not. So it's just kind of everything takes longer than you think it's going to. And so having your backup plan and being able to pivot each time. So like we've pivoted so many times because if you're really passionate about it, you really want to do it, you should. It's obviously hard, but it pays off. I'm sure you've had your ups and downs, but it's rewarding. That's why you stay with it. But it's just like you can't expect everything all at once. And you have to be willing to like make those sacrifices. So I was in my first trimester with our second kid, and I was going through the acquisition at Darwin. It was maybe 6 weeks away from closing. And then we had an acquisition offer at SoftLedger that like we really wanted because it would have been, we don't really want to get bought anymore in that same way, but it would have been like folded into a bigger publicly traded software company, right? We're like, that's perfect. So it was to be like a portfolio company, and just because we're a flexible general ledger, we can kind of fit into all these different parts. So we really see that that's where we'd add value. I was dual working on these two acquisitions and just projectile vomiting because first trimester. And then just when that like one fell through, it was just like soul crushing. Yeah. It really is. And I always tell that story because I'm like, that's like one of the lowest lives. But still, it's almost like it gives you such like strength and resilience and all these things. And I'm sure you've had those kind of moments too.
You learn a lot. And
you learn a lot.
You're like,
and it's
okay.
just like, but you just have to expect those things. It's almost like expect the unexpected, expect it to be hard. And then just expect to like have to pivot, like me going full time, that decision, that's really hard decision. And we didn't take it lightly. We spent months thinking about it. Even talking with this co-founder, like, what does that do? They're good friends. We're all good friends. His wife doesn't work there. Like the little things that you're like going through our investors. What are they going to think when, because we got one seed funding round in 2021. So we do have like one main investor. So talking to him about it, and anticipating what it looks like to the outside. Everything has a new layer to it.
So besides your co-founder, do your general friends, are they entrepreneurs? Are they still...
No.
So my life, I found that your friends have no idea what you're going through.
Yeah.
When you start your own business, they're like, oh, you're so lucky.
Yeah.
You have the freedom. Maybe you can tell us what that freedom really looks like.
For sure. Yeah. You hit the nail on the head there. It's ultimate flexibility, but you're working all the time. So when I was still working at another job, I felt like I had no flexibility. That was hard. So it was always nice having my husband be an entrepreneur for when like our kids were sick. He could run and get them. He doesn't have a boss, if you will. The pressure though that comes with starting your own company, with wanting to be successful, with when you're talking to your friends who aren't entrepreneurs and they're asking how the business is going, and you feel so much pressure to have it be something. And, for those first few years when it's not, like any starting company, you kind of are like, what do I say? What, you almost start dreading the family conversations, those kind of things.
And the doubters, right?
Yeah.
There's always, I don't know about you, but there's always people in your family usually. They're like, don't you think you should just get a job?
Yeah. Or how much longer are you going to get, and especially with...
Try this
Yeah,
thing.
are you going to try this? Yeah, and especially with me, like working full time, all my coworkers all the time. How much longer are you allowing him to do this? I was like, well, I mean, we're partners. It's not me. Like, okay, time's up. Yeah,
TikTok.
Yeah, and whatever that time frame is going to change anyway, right? So it's pointless to even have that because it's just going to change constantly.
Yeah,
like actually put a line in the sand that it's never going to be there.
Well, and I can only imagine as the startup, when I started my company, it didn't require a lot of capital. It was basically software reseller, right? You can just boom, have a laptop, go. But with you're starting to develop, you have to, write the code, the cash flow situation. That's the thing I find that your friends and family don't understand, whether you're at startup phase or whether you're in hyper growth.
Yeah.
When suddenly you're like, yay, we've sold all these millions of dollars of deals. Like now we have a cash flow problem. Like maybe you can share with us that ups and downs and
for sure. Yeah.
How you deal with that.
Yeah.
Because it's a little bit different.
It's different.
When it's your company
as
opposed to maybe being the CFO of
another
bigger established company.
It's kind of like, that's more like monopoly money. But yeah, to your services thing too. So my brother started a company at the same time I did, and it was the same thing as like yours, where it's more about the spread type of thing. So it's interesting seeing that kind of cash flow starting a company. For ours, it's capital investment. And really it was more just their time. Obviously, like it's very good to have another source of income. So my husband had me and his co-founder had his wife. So we at least could work and supply them with that when there were years when they didn't pay themselves, because that's what it is. It took a long time to just, like you said, build the software, especially with one engineer for the first 4 years. So yeah, the cash flow was, I remember when we first got the money from the Startup Accelerator and I built the forecast, everything. It was like the first line right at the top was months left till we run out of cash. And you see that dwindle and we have no customers, and it's been 18 months and you're like, okay, now it's negative. It's going to be negative in 3 months. When we got our seed funding round, I think we had 20,000 in the bank. So it wasn't nothing, but comparatively, that sounds like nothing. But we were making it work. We had 2 consultants that we paid to. We had enough customers at that time, but still, we were almost at $500,000 ARR, and still that's how much money was in the bank. As you know, too, once you start adding on these deals and doing stuff, well, now you have all the expenses on the back. It's not like it's just top line revenue and good to go. Just add that to the bank.
That's why the growth is so stressful. I mean, it's always stressful, but it's like a whole nother magnitude, especially when you're juggling with family and kids. Now, in doing so, I'm curious, have you found yourself creating a different circle around you? Maybe have you added more entrepreneurial friends in your life?
It's funny that I never thought about it until you asked now. But yeah, we have it. It's almost like our sanctuary is not that. You know what I mean? And maybe it's because we work so much together. We're talking about SoftLedger all the time. You know what I mean? It's like if you have your own company and everything, you're talking about it so much at home and with your spouse and everything that it's like, we don't want to talk about it with anyone. In Santa Monica, we were in that accelerator, and then we also were one in San Francisco. So we'd fly up there and sometimes go too. And just being around those people, then all you're doing is talking about it. All you're doing is talking about company stuff. So it wasn't purposeful, but I kind of feel like that's maybe why we haven't added any. It's like the comfort of, okay, we're out with friends. They don't want to hear about our job. Great, because that's all we do is talk about it.
Yeah. So what lessons do you think you've learned? What are the biggest? Because you come from this accounting and finance world where, let's be honest, life is structured. And now you're in what I'm going to call the super unstructured world of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
What advice would you give for people that are thinking about that transition, or maybe they've started it and they're really struggling? Because it's a lot.
It's a lot, and it's hard. I think the biggest thing is that you have to let go of a lot of best practices and things that you've learned as like an accountant, right? I had very traditional CPA, stuffy background, if you will, of crossing every T, dotting every I. It can't work like that. I think my husband starting the company first was probably better because he has a little bit more of that shoot from the hip. And you kind of need that. You have to let go of some stuff. Everything can't be so buttoned up and you found every penny in your reconciliation. It doesn't work like that.
I love that example because that was, as you were describing it, that was the exact moment I thought in my life where I had to let go.
Yeah.
And it was the day I said, I don't need to reconcile the checking account to the penny. It was so stressful to say, I'm just going to let it go.
Yeah.
And then when I did, I was like, wait, that's kind of liberating. Yeah. What other things can I just let go, right?
Because you also don't even think about that, especially in a place like Fannie Mae. Moving that ship any direction is insane, because it's almost like pseudo government / giant company. And when you think about all the stuff that you thought you had to do, and it's like, again, I know that like bigger companies have other risks and compliance, but when you whittle all that down, it's a smaller company, you don't have that. You learn all these things that maybe you didn't even have to do at the big companies, or maybe you do, but under that structure, but you don't everywhere. These like, again, best practices. It doesn't always have to be legalese or like CPA to the penny or whatever, you can just kind of be like, that's not important. This is important. And you focus on things that are like the growth, sales. You have to put all those first, and then everything else is second.
I had to really kind of even train my team, focus on minimal viable product, like that was, and for people that like really structure and like accounting, that's like one of the biggest leaps that you have to take.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that you could survive in a startup and be that tight.
You can't. And it's great to have, that background. Like I really like having the technical background and starting in that, and a more anal background, if you will, because you still like catch things you probably wouldn't otherwise. Everyone can't be the shoot from the hip guy in a startup, right? Like you have to have some people that still have that background, but then have adapted and now know when to let things go, when to not find that penny, when to do things that just are focused more on growth and putting that first.
Yeah. So obviously AI is everywhere. And I don't think we're not allowed, I don't think, to have a podcast without AI. Like
every conversation, every news article, AI.
Yeah, you got to just throw a little AI in there. So
if you forget, you just throw it in right at the end.
As an entrepreneur, are you guys really infusing a lot of AI in your organization?
We are, yeah. And accounting software, it's funny because people kind of don't even realize that NetSuite has always had it in there for 15 years. They've had bank matching rules. They've had things like that. It's stuff like that that's funny. We're like, I feel like as accountants, we get this reputation that we don't like change and things like that. And really, we do. Technology has been a huge part of every company I've worked at. It's been like, the more you can make things efficient, the better. So kind of background on that. But yes, of course, we've included it in the product, everything, bank matching rules with AP, inbox stuff. But then in a day-to-day life, I'm using it all the time. I do a lot of accounting codification lookups, stuff like that. That's like where it's really powerful to me. It's like Google on steroids or something, where you're just like, show me all the big four interpretations of this codification, show me this, show me that. And it is funny because it gets stuff wrong where Google didn't, but it also didn't tell you this as much. It is this back and forth you are teaching. It's an interesting process. But yeah, I really like using it day to day, and then also in our product, using that knowledge that you're kind of getting from using it into the product with our support agent or stuff like that. Like we're getting so much better at like writing support docs and everything in a way that it can read it better and tell customers. And then, you save obviously we only have one customer success person we have for a while because like our agent's good enough, those kind of things that really make everything so much more efficient. And I think everyone's getting so much smart about how to use it. It's really powerful. And but you have to learn how to use it.
So do you have a preference what tools you're using? Because I don't know, I use like 4 different AI tools and I can make them compete against each other.
Yeah, I pretty much just stick with Claude and ChatGPT, but then occasionally I'll throw in Gemini and
Copilot or something.
Yeah. But I usually have like Claude and ChatGPT both up, and I'm like, okay, so in lease accounting.
Have you named them?
No.
My chat's named Clyde. I don't know why.
Okay, I like that. Clyde.
I just give him a
that
name.
one. Yeah.
So you're kind of like, hi, Clyde.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know about you. It's like, get a little creepy.
It is a little bit. And you know what's so funny? It's like people are like, oh, all of them have names. And I was using ChatGPT first exclusively. And so I kept trying to ask it. I was like, what's your name? Tell me your name. And it wouldn't tell me. I think maybe I was like late to the boat on the name thing.
My husband used it so extensively. He drove our dog from Tampa to Colorado, where we live in the summer, and he talked to the entire drive, 33 hours, to his chat.
No.
So by the time he arrives in Colorado, he's sitting on our back deck and overlooking this beautiful mountain, and he's finally having his arrival beer, and he's talking to his chat. And I'm like, what are you doing? This is like a couple of years ago. He's like, I'm talking to chat. It's got this, I think it's an Australian accent, but he's like, chat, meet my wife, Heather. And I'm like, okay, this.
Like, I'm out. I'm
like, oh my God, are you replacing me with your AI?
I love that.
I don't know about you. I'm always discovering new ways and creating mini DNA clones of you to answer things and marketing.
Yeah.
Like
that part of it's really interesting too. Like
mind blowing.
It is. Yeah. Like our CTO and co-founder, he created one that's just for if we have to ask him questions. So yeah, we call it Balance Buddy. We made this AI joke mascot for our company, and it's called the Balance Buddies, and we're all like super cheesy abacus calculators, and so we call it Balance Buddies. So you Slack just like, hey, Balance Buddy, how do we do this? And it responds like how Jeff would respond.
So as you grow your company SoftLedger, what do you see the next big step is? Like, what's your big bodacious goal?
Be bigger than Microsoft. No, I'm just kidding.
You can do it. I believe in you. You got a ways to go, maybe, but
I think it's going back to like the original thing that we started this for. It's funny, we had these old sunglasses, the first ones we got for the first conference we went to, that say the anti-ERP. And that was always kind of our thing. And it never really like took off. And now it's starting to, because everyone sees the value in having all of these softwares interconnected. That's kind of how we always viewed the world. So we have like 100% open API and everything. So you can have all your operating systems and things like that connect in. And so we always thought that was the way to go, not to be like the big behemoths because they're so rigid.
Yes.
And with every industry, accounting's different. With every company's accounting's different. People don't appreciate how many variations there are of accounting and what you can do and how much it's more like law and like pleading your case versus these rigid rules. And so you need so many softwares. It's not about having the one NetSuite, the one Microsoft, Oracle. We need a million of these, or we need a flexible software that integrates in with everything. And that's kind of what we always envisioned the world to be. I know everyone hates their tech stack because it's a lot to keep track of because you have 35 softwares, but that's the most efficient way to do it. You have all these little things that can easily be connected into your books and records, your general ledger, or anything, your CRM. Everything's just in this interconnected web and world. And because everyone can code now easier, everyone can build these integrations easier. Now's the time where we're like, okay, that might actually come true, that anti-ERP thing.
I love that. And it so resonates with me because in a previous life, many years ago, I actually I was a consultant implementing Lawson ERP back in the day. And why I left that space is I got frustrated with it because it was enterprise resource planning, but it really didn't have the capability to do any planning. Right. And that was back in the day when you would upgrade like every 18 months.
Yeah.
And it was like
so painful.
It's the
same system.
Oh my God.
And you're like, how is this the same?
And now we're at this point where technology is leapfrogging each other, not like every quarter, but every month, every week. Like all of a sudden, this is better. Oh, look at this one's better. Oh,
Yeah.
so the ability to have that flexibility to use the best tool for your business and not just say, oh, here's this big system and I'm going to.
And it has stuff for
all of the things. And I always felt like people, because it was so challenging and to connect everything, they would change their business to meet the software. And what I'm hearing you saying is that you guys are creating a ledger system that will allow you to be flexible to meet your business.
Exactly. Yeah, where you don't have to make those decisions.
Yeah.
You can have like your specific in-house operating software and all this stuff and not change anything about it to fit your accounting. I love accounting, but it should always be second. Your operation should be first. Everything that you need to run your business should be first. And then your accounting software should be able to like mold into whatever you need it to be to get your US GAAP, your IFRS, everything else, like your compliant financial statements, and understand how your business is doing from a numbers perspective.
Yeah, because your operations is really where your strategy is. How you're operating, you want that to be unique.
Yeah.
And yet be able to report on it from following GAAP and so forth.
Yeah, that's definitely like 100%. I love the planning part of that. I never even thought about that.
I was like, enterprise resource planning, you can't even plan. Yeah. So that's what led me into the world of FP&A. Like I was like, come on, the fun part's like, let's.
I know. Yeah, that's why I love FP&A. That's out of all the jobs I've done, I'm like, I love FP&A because it's like the art.
It's a creative art. Yeah, that's exactly it. Well, this has been a lot of fun. We're starting to creep up on time here. Is there anything that you're like, if I could leave this message for members of FEI and listeners out there?
I would say to take more risk. You know, again, we talked about the downsides, we talked about the whatever, but there needs to be more finance and accounting people as entrepreneurs. I know the way our brains are wired, we don't want to do it. It's scary because we're the adults in the room, right? We always sit and say, like, no, we need to be responsible. But a lot of that is then we're lagging behind in all these technological advances and everything happening because we're not in the room with people. They're making decisions on behalf of us, you know, and I think like we need to be in there. We need to be doing it.
That's such a great nugget because what I find in my executive coaching business is a lot of times CFOs come to me because they feel like their voice isn't being heard. They're like, I'm invited to the table, but
I'm
not
really. Respected. Yeah, I'm not listened to.
And a lot of times they'll say, you know, the CFO will make these decisions and then come to me and say, make this happen. And they're like, wait, why wasn't I invited to the room? And so that's kind of what we work at, is to get their voice heard and get them into those bigger decisions. But there's also a component that you said there about risk. I'm wondering, when your husband and you sat down and decided, okay, we're going to do this, was there any thought pattern that went through it? Was there like a scorecard that you were like, here's my spreadsheet, I got a spreadsheet for that, let me like pros and cons?
I wish it was more technical, but honestly, we didn't even realize we had this passion for accounting software. But it was more like we feel the passion of being accountants, honestly. Like we would say we're like accountants first, and we just want to make their jobs easier. And it's frustrating seeing that there aren't enough people trying to do that. Listen to them in these rooms and like, what would make your life easier? What do you think? And some of it too, I think, is just that we're not the risk takers. We're not the ones doing that. And so I feel like when he was talking about the software, we just started for the 2 years that he was doing it nights and weekends. We just started getting really passionate about that, about solving that. So, you know, our first little tagline was like, accountants deserve better software. But it's really, accountants deserve better everything to me. You know, I'm like, we're working so hard, we're doing all this stuff. And I just think because of that hesitation to make those bold moves, we sometimes aren't always being listened to at the table or stuff like that. And it's just more about like kind of we need to kind of change the conversation and the way we're viewed, that we can really be front line. We can be front office. We can really help with everything.
I love that. Change the conversation and how we're viewed. Yes. Yeah. When I started my first company, I literally got my spreadsheet out and I created this thing. And I was like, if I could, like, if everything went south, I said, I'm going to give myself 6 months and like really all in, right? And what do I really need to afford? And I came up with, my list was ramen noodles and dog food. I was like, if I could go back to my college days and live on ramen noodles and dog food, I'm set for 6 months. So thankfully I didn't have to eat the ramen noodles. But it kind of makes you giggle every time you see ramen. You're like, ah.
Well, I love that you said that because when I moved to Santa Monica, my husband and his co-founder moved first, and then they were living together in an apartment for 4 months. Then I moved out, and then we got the one across the hall for his co-founder and wife, and she moved out like maybe 2 months. But for a while, like the three of us were living in this apartment.
Headquarters.
And I come in, and it's just ramen noodles in the cupboard. I was like, we were all 31. I was like, guys, this. We're not 22 entrepreneurs. We're 31-year-old married entrepreneurs. You have to get other stuff besides ramen noodles.
Oh, well, this has been so much fun, Chrissy. I wish you and your husband and SoftLedger the best of luck. I think you guys are doing some amazing work, and accountants deserve better software.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, it's likewise. I, again, love meeting anyone in this space, doing their own thing. I think it's really great what you're doing. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. What a great conversation with Chrissy O'Hara. I love how honest she was about the real journey of entrepreneurship, because from the outside, people often see freedom. But Chrissy shared freedom also comes with pressure, uncertainty, cash flow stress, constant pivots, and the discipline to keep going when the plans change. One of my biggest takeaways from the conversation is that finance and accounting leaders have a much bigger role in playing and shaping the future. We can't just sit back and wait for technology, AI, or software companies to define how our work should be done. We need more finance leaders in the room, building, challenging, advising, and taking more risks. Chrissy also reminded us that perfection is not always the goal. In a startup, and frankly in leadership, sometimes you have to let go of the need to reconcile to every penny and focus on what really matters: growth, strategy, customers, and building something that solves a real problem. And I love her message about accountants deserve better. Better tools, better systems, better conversations, and a bigger voice at the table. So here's my challenge to you. Where are you playing it too safe? Where are you waiting for permission? And where could you take a smarter risk that moves you, moves your team, moves your organization forward faster? Thank you, Chrissy O'Hara, for joining me today and for sharing such a candid look at the transition from finance leader to entrepreneur. I'm Heather Cole, executive coach and the host of the FEI Podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Your career doesn't grow in isolation. It grows in rooms, relationships, and real conversations. So here's your next move. Expand your network through the FEI network, because the right connections increase your net worth and your impact. Plug into the programs, the people, and the community, and keep showing up until opportunity recognizes your name.